I'd like to welcome everyone. This is Pat Bailey with Out and Equal to the Safe and Equal 101 webinar. We are recorded today. All your lines will be muted. There is the opportunity to chat from your box. If you have questions, please send them in. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to Melissa Reagan from No Dumb Questions. Melissa?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Pat. I want to, first of all, thank Pat and Out and Equal for being such great supporters of this project. Pat has really gone above and beyond in hosting us here, so thank you very much to you and Out and Equal. And thanks, everyone, for joining us. I just wanted to give a quick introduction. So I'm Melissa Reagan. I'm a documentary filmmaker based in Oakland, California, and this event today came about it's been a long evolution for me. I made a film called No Dumb Questions going on 10 years ago now. When one day a friend of mine came to me and said, "Oh my gosh, you're never going to believe my brother's becoming a woman, and I have to tell my girls, and what do I do?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm just a lesbian. I don't know about transgender stuff, but I'm pretty sure we should film this." And so we did, and we managed to capture some really sweet moments in the next month of their life as they've kind of dealt as a family with this new reality of one of their family members transitioning to a different gender. And I've just been so pleased and touched that the film has really worked for so many people as an educational tool to spark dialogue and kind of help people loosen up and laugh at themselves at what makes them uncomfortable, and just really start talking about not just transgender, but any lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, gender nonconforming issues, and even, being an ally and what does that mean. So we've been filming with the family on and off over these years and are looking forward to hopefully getting a 10 years later version of the film out sometime in the next year. And in the process of that have also started to think about, well, what would it mean to create a website where anyone can ask their own dumb questions and tell their own stories, and what would it be like if we brought together, like we're doing today, just a variety of organizations that many of whom have used the film in the past, and some that may have not, but to really kind of look at how do we create this kind of change, this change of getting people to open up and ask dumb questions and tell personal stories to happen in all the environments where we live, in the K-12 schools and colleges and workplaces, faith communities, therapist offices, sort of anywhere, in our families, in our homes. So I'm hoping that what we'll get out of today is kind of a nice sort of a 101 in how do we create environments that are safe and equal for LGBT people and allies. And we've got speakers for that sort of cover all those different areas. And I'm personally myself really excited to hear what everyone has to say. I'm going to just go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, and you'll hear me come back in between each of the speakers, kind of to transition us to the next person. And we'll also get some information out about what kind of things you can do to follow up and take action after this session. The session, as Pat said, I think will also be recorded, and we'll be in touch with everyone to help you figure out how to help us spread the word about it to get it out as a resource to folks who can use it. So let me just go ahead and introduce Jean Marie from PFLAG. And Jean Marie will tell you all about her, but she's just a wonderful trainer in this whole area of how do we bring along allies. And I'm really excited to have Jean Marie here to kind of kick us off.
Thank you, Melissa, and hi, everybody. I'm Jean Marie Navetta. I'm the Director of Equality Partnerships and Communications at PFLAG National, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. PFLAG National is all over the country, but our national office is based in Washington, D.C., although I now work out of San Francisco, California. And actually, my email is up there if anybody wants to reach me at the end of this, as well as PFLAG's URL, which is pflag.org. To quickly tell you a little bit about PFLAG, we are kind of that original storytelling kind of organization. PFLAG started with a mom, and there's a picture of her on the screen right now, and her name is Jean Manford. And to make her very long and amazing story kind of short, Jean had two kids. Her son was gay, her daughter was straight, and she recognized that life was very different for her son than it was for her daughter, and she wanted to start talking about it. And so she did, and she started speaking to the press, and she started speaking to other parents, and eventually it led to the formation of PFLAG, which is Parents, Families, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. We started in 1973 with a couple of people in a church basement, and today we have over 250 affiliates and chapters across the country. And we have a three-part mission of education, support, and advocacy. PFLAG has very much been sort of the organization that a lot of people have seen kind of as the straight voice in the LGBT movement, but a lot of those straight voices have been family voices, you know, parents and brothers and sisters who want to support their LGBT family. And over the past few years, PFLAG noticed that there are a lot of allies out there, people who don't have that family connection, but really want to become engaged in the fight for equality. And so we created the program that I work on, which is called Straight for Equality, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But starting to think about where we are today, I want to bring your attention to, you know, that a lot of progress has been made out there for LGBT people. And the slide that I have up right now from the Movement Advancement Progress sort of looks at a decade of progress. And we've had some really amazing changes happen over even the last 10 years. And much of this has happened because of the involvement of straight allies working alongside LGBT people. I mean, we've had more states banning discrimination based on both sexual orientation and gender identity, more safe schools laws, more GLBT elected officials out there, more people who think that being gay is okay. And this is tremendous, tremendous progress that we've been seeing around the country, and for that matter, around the world. And again, I think a lot of that's happened because of LGBT people and their straight allies telling their stories about why equality matters to them on a personal level and how it affects us every single day. And this really speaks to that amazing combination of both policy work and personal stories. And speaking of personal stories, one of the other really great things that we're realizing is that right now in this world, and particularly in this country, more people say that they personally know someone who is LGBT than ever before. Right now, the statistic actually as of 2 years ago was that 7 in 10 people in the United States say that they personally know someone who is LGBT. And at PFLAG, we always like to say that the other 3 just don't know it yet. It's only a matter of time. So there's a lot of visibility and there's been a lot of progress out there, but there's also some serious challenges that still remain. You know, in spite of all of those law changes and in spite of all those people who say, yes, I know somebody and I'm friends with somebody who's LGBT, here's what it still looks like in the country. We still have a Defense of Marriage Act. We still have tremendous problems with school bullying and harassment. There's still no fully inclusive non-discrimination act out there. Challenges when it comes to adoption and foster care. Don't ask, don't tell is tragically still in effect. LGBT people are rejected by their faith communities all the time, and there are still big health care disparities, and those are just sort of the big pieces. So what we're looking at is, in spite of legislative progress and in spite of visibility, we still need a lot more help. And the only way we're going to start changing these trends is if we get more straight allies, more allies who are willing to work through their challenges around these issues and who are willing to speak up, because we can't achieve equality alone. And for many of this means engaging new allies, sometimes people who we didn't think could be our allies. But we often know that allies, we can find new allies all over the place. But in order to find them, we sometimes have to figure out what is it that keeps people from being allies. And at this point, I want to actually turn it over to everybody who's on the call. Right now on your screen, you should see our first poll question of this call, which is, what do you think is the biggest barrier out there that keeps allies or potential allies in the closet? Why don't you think that people actually are supportive? And I see that people are starting to put their answers in right now. And we're going to just give it another couple of seconds to let everybody answer. So the possibilities are, do you think it's about religion? Do you think people are afraid of being considered to be gay? Do you think it's that people are homophobic, that they want to avoid controversy, or they don't know enough? What's the top reason? So anyone who hasn't answered, please continue to put your answers in there. We're almost there. Because actually identifying what these reasons are actually will help us sort of see what our next steps are in trying to educate and engage new allies. Well, I'm looking at the responses right now. And if you take a look, you can see where we are. From the people on this call, the majority of people have said that everyone, a lot of people just want to avoid controversy. After that, we see that people are afraid that Other people will think they're gay if they speak on this issue. They don't know enough, and perhaps they have what they feel are some dumb questions to ask and don't know where to ask them is right up there. Religion is definitely coming up as a result. And as you can see, and I'm not very excited to see this, we're recognizing that maybe homophobia isn't the top reason that people don't support equality. And the kind of neat thing about what we're seeing from results like this is that actually the other issues here, religion and being afraid of being labeled gay or wanting to avoid controversy, are things that we as existing allies and as LGBT people who are out there can help people through. These are things that we can solve and things we can provide solutions to new allies on, so we can engage those allies and really empower them to start taking action. And actually, I'm excited to say that the results that the people who were on this call today gave are actually what PFLAG has found in our research over the past few years. That time and time again when we do polling around this issue, we find that the #1 reason that people are afraid about talking about this is they don't want to get into arguments and they don't like controversy. After that, religion, the fear of being labeled gay, and that they don't know enough about the issue. So again, these are all barriers that allies out there are saying that they have, and these are barriers that we can help people along with, but especially if we speak to them in a different way and maybe change our strategies up a little bit. And I'm going to tell you about maybe how you can try doing that, and everybody else on this call is going to talk about it too. But before I go any further, I want to give you 2 more quick statistics. The first one is this, and it's about religion, because many of us are really challenged by the issue of religion and how it plays into LGBT acceptance or rejection. But one of the neat things that we're really seeing at PFLAG is that this trend is beginning to change. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, we did polling and asked people, how does religion influence your willingness to speak up on behalf of LGBTs when you hear something bad? And more people, said, my religion keeps me from saying anything, than it does. But when we did the polling 2 years later, we found that more and more people are saying, I speak up positively in favor of equality because of my religion. And to us, this should be a constant reminder that sometimes those people who we've written off are those people who could be our greatest allies. So this is a journey for new allies as well as those of us who are engaged in the fight already. And I want to give you one quick last statistic. That polling that PFLAG has been doing for a few years, here's the number that always bothers me. We find, and this happened in 2007 and in 2009, only 2% of straight people that we polled across the country said that an LGBT person actually asked them to speak up when they hear something wrong. So this says to us, we actually need to start doing work on our part to engage these allies. People are out there waiting to take action, but we need to help them along. So what does this actually mean for us? Well, it means a few things. The first thing that I think that it means is we need to extend a really big invitation to new potential allies. That means that maybe people who you've never had a conversation with about why equality matters, you need to start talking to. And sometimes it's tough, and I know it, because it's scary to talk to those people who we don't know how they're going to respond. But if we have conversations with people and tell them our stories and talk about why equality matters on a personal level, and then we help them see ways that they can become engaged, we can start creating new allies that will help us create those changes that still are lingering out there. I also ask you to start thinking about maybe how we define the idea of who our allies are. Rather than making allies a group of people who can fit into a checklist that we've created of what they need to do to be good people, maybe we need to realize that allies can come in a lot of different forms, and that allies are people who are willing to learn more. Maybe they don't know everything. Maybe they still have some dumb questions, but this makes them allies, and they're willing to ask those questions. Allies are people who, are willing to face the barriers that they have to coming out as allies, and, are willing to find lots of different ways to be supportive. So maybe they don't support every legislative effort that we have, but maybe if we keep walking alongside with them, eventually they will. So I encourage you to think about allies broadly so we can start, bringing more people into our circle. And one of the tools that we use at PFLAG is we sort of have an ally spectrum, and I have it up on the screen right now. And you can see that we think that allies are everybody who, are just willing to listen to our conversations and maybe aren't on board with us yet, to those who become more comfortable in having the conversations themselves. Some of the conversations, that are tough, Some of those allies eventually, if we continue to educate them and walk alongside with them, they'll become those people who are willing to intervene in difficult situations. Those people who are willing to join our, our organizations, grassroots and big national organizations too. And eventually we hope that if we continue to educate our allies and listen to their challenges and work with them, they will be those people who are going to Washington with us and creating, policy change that really needs to happen. But in order for this to happen, we also need to sort of check our assumptions about people at the door too. So many of us have been hurt by those who we've tried to reach out to and who have rejected us, but maybe we need to rethink our conversations. And I think, the No Dumb Questions film was a perfect example of where sometimes, our first conversations are going to be tough and they're going to be a little bit difficult, but if we continue to stick with people, we really can make some progress. So in reaching out to new allies, I encourage you to check your assumptions about people at the door. So just because, for example, somebody goes to church doesn't mean they're not, willing to listen to our message. And maybe political stuff can't be the first condition for being an ally. Maybe it's just somebody who's willing to actually start having conversations. And we need to accept that not all allies are the same. Maybe they don't fit into the definition we originally had in our heads of them. But if they're those people who are going to intervene, across the board and are going to start conversations and tell their stories and start creating change where they are, they're really, really important people. And I think that when we do this, there's a lot of stuff that we can get out of it. First of all, we don't define people and shove them into boxes. Second, it lets people to start becoming engaged where they are right now. Third, it lets us expand those people to realize that they're part of our community, even if they're not super political people quite yet, and it opens up new possibilities for us to work. So our challenge, if we're willing to accept it, is we need to start inviting new people, having those conversations with people we haven't talked to in the past, and make them realize that they're invited to ask their dumb questions maybe and start talking to us. We need to listen to what they're struggling with and walk alongside them on their journey to becoming better allies. We need to show them ways that they can take action, from the really big political things to maybe how to deal when somebody tells a gay joke. And we need to let them really be out and proud allies. So how do we do that? First of all, extend the invitation to allies. Let your friends know that it really does help when they tell their stories. And it does help when they intervene in situations, and it does help, frankly, when they vote too. We need to start thinking about our own assumptions and putting them in check, because it colors the way we approach new people. Adjust our expectations and recognize that allies have a coming out process too, in the same way that LGBT people do. And it starts quietly, but it can get pretty loud and powerful if we continue to work with it. We need to stick with them, and we need to provide them with resources that were created for allies to get strong. Great films and great tools, and I'll tell you a couple of those in a minute. We need to continue to encourage them as they start coming out and recognize that it's tough for them too. And we need to be persistent, but with a lot of kindness, and recognize that in the same way people were gentle with us in our coming out process, we need to sometimes be gentle with our allies, because in the end, it pays off. So quickly, I just want to introduce you to a couple of tools if you haven't ever seen them before. The project that I work on is called Straight for Equality, and we have a couple of things. We have a great website, which is straightforequality.org. We even have the Straight Ally Pledge that people can take. We also offer 2 publications that are up there, the original Guide to Being a Straight Ally and Straight for Equality in Healthcare, and those are both totally free downloads. And I really encourage you to download them and pass them along to somebody who you want to start a conversation with. Hopefully you'll find them useful and a little bit amusing too, and a new way to look at this. And, before I turn this over to our next speaker, I really want to share one last quote with you, and this is from one of our former national PFLAG presidents, and he always used to talk about the power of telling our stories to people who we don't necessarily talk to. Telling your story to somebody new who you've never thought you could tell your story to, and he said that every time we tell our truth, we are creating a world where the sense that there is a shame in being LGBT or having a child or loved one who is becomes less pervasive. When we tell our stories, especially to those new allies and especially to the ones who we didn't think could ever be with us, we are changing the world. So I just want to thank everybody for being on this call. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing. I'm just so proud of what's happening in this movement. And I will definitely be around if anybody has any questions. But again, we're pflag.org or straightforequality.org.
Jean Marie, thank you so much. That was wonderful. So I want to go ahead and turn us over to Esther Herr from the Anti-Defamation League.
Great. Thanks. Welcome, everybody. I am Esther Herr. I'm speaking on behalf of the Anti-Defamation League. And really quickly, just to let folks know who ADL is, we're a 97-year-old civil rights and human relations organization. Many of you may know ADL in the context of its work with the Jewish community fighting anti-Semitism, but some of you may not know and realize that ADL, when it started in 1913, had a dual mission. And this mission was not only to protect the rights of Jews, but also to protect the rights of all people. And this is, following on the theme about allies, this is where we feel like we can play a pivotal role to help the LGBT community in its efforts towards justice and equality. And so the many ways that we do it, both nationally and among our 28 regional offices, includes advocating for effective, responsive, and inclusive hate crime laws and anti-bullying laws. And certainly in other ways, too, is our interactive anti-bias training programs that we provide to schools and colleges. And I want to say a little bit more about that. That falls under the ADL's A World of Difference Institute. A little bit about the Institute, really quickly. We provide anti-bias training programs, and we approach it in a very specific manner. And I think this is very effective in any of the work that we do. The basic premise, if you will, is that we were not born prejudiced, that we have been taught, whether consciously or unconsciously, through our friends, our families, schools, religious institutions, and the media, about how we're supposed to understand the world, how we're supposed to interpret what we see. And so that learning contextualizes our lens. The lens is not a neutral thing. The lens is definitely shaped and refined by this socialization process, if you will. So the way that we approach it then is that we ask people to begin to consciously and explicitly unlearn the prejudices that they've acquired over their lifetime. It's a very difficult process. We make no bones about it. This change is a process. It's slow, but it's very important. We say that it takes a lifetime. We know that conflict is possible, but it doesn't have to be negative. The thing that we talk a lot about is this idea of creating an environment that's safe and uncomfortable. Some people say, well, I don't want it to be uncomfortable. But the reality is that these topics are uncomfortable. But we need to hold on to that and grapple with it and move through it. But we can do that in a safe context. So that's a very important piece I wanted to share. And then, again, echoing on what you've heard earlier, and this is hard for some people, we have to assume goodwill. We need to reserve our negative judgments and our first impressions in order for us to begin to bridge the gap, if you will, to begin to have the dialogue. And I wanted to share those things because as I was watching the documentary again last week, I was reminded by how the people in this video, how the family practiced all these things as they try to work towards understanding Barbara's new chapter in her life. The girls, the parents of Barbara, they all engaged in this very important process towards this understanding. And I saw this in 3 particular areas that I wanted to highlight. So the first thing that I saw was that they had the ability and the willingness to ask the questions. The girls asked a lot of questions, and they even sometimes asked if it was okay to ask those questions. They demonstrated a form of sensitivity. But equally important when you ask the questions is asking yourself, would I like to have this question asked of me in this way? So we need to be very thoughtful about how we approach asking those questions. I also wanted to mention, too, that there is, it's important also to not ask them on behalf of the entire community. That's just unfair because they have a very specific perspective on this matter. It's one of many voices within the community, but no way are they representing the entire community. So be very thoughtful about that situation as well. The other thing that I saw in the documentary that I think could be used in us when we engage in this conversation is answering those questions. We saw in the documentary that the parents were willing to answer their questions, and they didn't make them feel bad for asking those very genuine and curious questions that they had. We certainly heard that Barbara was open to answering those questions as well. This really helped everybody get to a point where they felt more comfortable in the situation at hand. And I even recall that I think the oldest daughter, Chelsea I think is her name, by having this environment happening, she was able to actually advocate on behalf of her aunt in class. I think it was in health class when the issue of the transgender community came up. So we saw what that resulted in. So the third thing that I saw that I think is also really important for all of us when we engage in these conversations is the ability and the willingness to create an environment where the asking and the answering takes place. Again, I wanted to highlight that asking the questions is not just simply asking questions. Again, think about not asking them to express their opinion on behalf of the entire group. Timing, the nonverbals are equally important in addition to the words that we use when we ask these questions. And then last, the reality is that, yes, there are no dumb questions, but there are certainly a lot of potentially insensitive and inappropriate questions, and we need to also be very thoughtful of that. I know that I believe GLAD it was that kind of helped understand this context by doing this inversion process. So some questions that we would that some people may ask, if you invert it to a kind of a straight context, you can see how ridiculous that is. So, for example, a question that you can invert is your heterosexuality a phase, and how old do you think you'll be when you grow out of it? Or do you think therapy would help you to examine your heterosexuality and perhaps even cure it? As you can hear, those are really ridiculous questions. But those are the questions, if you replace heterosexual to gay, you know, a lot of people ask that, and they don't understand why that's inappropriate. So that inversion practice could be very helpful for people who are straight to think about the appropriate nature of asking those questions. For the purposes of time, I'm not going to go into the specifics of how ADL has used this video, but we do have a training activity that's all written out for you, and it should be on the No Dumb Questions website. So check it out and see if you have any questions. Let me know. We can talk about it offline or at the end. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you so much, Esther. That was really wonderful. Yeah, and there is a discussion guide that was created by the Anti-Defamation League available at nodumbquestions.com. And there's also another discussion guide that was created by the Unitarian Universalist Association that's up on the site as well. Let me now turn it over to Justin Tanis from the National Center for Transgender Equality. I'm so glad, Justin, that you were able to join us today. A lot of times when we talk about LGBT topics, it seems like the conversation is really just about LGB or really just about LG. So I'm so glad that you're here and looking forward to hearing what you have to tell us.
Great, thank you. As I said, my name is Justin Tanis. I'm with the National Center for Transgender Equality, and we're an organization that advocates for the rights of transgender people at the federal level. And what I want to talk to you about today is a survey that we did with the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force on transgender people's experiences of discrimination. And we also did this in collaboration with Penn State University, and I know Sue Rankin is on the call, and Sue is one of the folks that we worked closely with, and are so glad for the participation of her and her colleagues in this. It was a 70-question survey, so we have a ton of data. And one of the things that we see overall is that when people had an experience of discrimination, it wasn't just the trauma of that experience of discrimination, but it led to all kinds of other bad outcomes in their lives. And I want to talk specifically today about some of the information we found out about the experiences of students who were bullied, because since that's a current topic. The survey was the largest survey to date on the discrimination experienced by transgender people. And we had 6,450 total surveys of transgender and gender nonconforming people. And our geographic distribution and many of the other demographic criteria did a good job mirroring the country as a whole. I won't go into that, but we have more information if you're interested. Well, one of the questions we asked is, did people attend school at any level as a transgender or gender nonconforming person? And 49% of our sample said yes. And so we're going to talk about those people today. And you'll see that the younger people were more likely to have attended school than older people with an identity as transgender or gender nonconforming. But if you have seen charts before about who's in school, this curve should be significantly steeper. So we had a higher percentage of people who were in their middle ages attending school and a lower percentage of younger people than the country as a whole. But one of the things we found was that large numbers of students, in this case 61%, reported that when they were attending school, they were harassed and bullied, and students reported being harassed and bullied both by their peers and by their teachers. If we look just at the students in K through 12 and the experience of those students as opposed to the overall sample of students who attended school, and we asked for everything from kindergarten through graduate school, but K through 12 is clearly where a larger percentage of problems occurred. And 78% of the students report having been harassed in school, and 35% physically assaulted, and 12% sexually assaulted while they were in school. And if you look at the overall sample as a whole, 23% reported that they were physically assaulted in school, and 8% that they were sexually assaulted. Obviously, these are devastating numbers. We also found that people ended up having to leave school because of the harassment that they faced as transgender people. 5% of the students were expelled from school because of their gender identity, and it goes up to 6% for students in K through 12. So they simply, because of their transgender or gender nonconforming identity, they were asked to leave. And another 15% reported that they had to leave school because the harassment was so bad. So we think these numbers explain why a lower percentage of 18 to 24-year-olds in our sample were in school than the general population. We also found that there were a number of bad outcomes that came for students. If they were harassed or bullied in schools, they are more likely to have lost a job due to bias or to be unemployed. In our overall sample, 26% of the people had lost a job because of discrimination. But this is almost 3 times that number. So students who are harassed or bullied in schools are significantly more likely to face later job discrimination or to be unemployed. They also were much more likely to work in the street economy. I think that's, yeah, there we go, which was selling drugs or engaging in sex work. 71% of the students who were bullied and harassed in school compared to 29% of students who were not bullied or harassed in school. So clearly this had an impact on people's job prospects in the future and the ways in which they have to survive. Students who were bullied and harassed in school also had other health outcomes. One of the questions that we asked people was whether they used drugs or alcohol to help themselves cope with the effect of discrimination. And students who had been harassed, bullied, assaulted, or expelled used drugs or alcohol. 35% of them reported using those things to cope with the discrimination they faced, versus 21% of people who had not experienced that. Also, they were much more. 25% of people who had been bullied in school reported being currently or formerly homeless, compared to 14% of people who had not experienced that. So, again, a large increase in the percentage of people who ended up living on the streets. And then finally, students who were in the group that reported they had to leave school because the harassment was so bad that they really felt they couldn't stay, had a significantly higher HIV rate of 5%, which is 8 times the rate of the general population. So obviously the harassment and bullying they experienced had long-term health consequences for the participants. And one of the other places where we saw see a significant problem for people was in the area of suicide. We asked our participants overall, and that top number should be 41%. That's a typo. It's bad, but it's not quite that bad. But we asked our participants if they had ever attempted suicide, and 41% said yes. And that's the same number estimate for the U.S. general population is 1.6%, so clearly a staggering increase. But among students who had been harassed or bullied, 51% of them, so more than half, had ended up attempting suicide at some point in their life. And if teachers are the perpetrators of that crime, it's even worse. If teachers harass them, physically assaulted them, or sexually assaulted them, you can see the numbers there. But the risk was even greater. And students who had to leave school because the harassment was so bad also were at significantly greater risk. 68% of a population attempting suicide is just a devastating number. So, and here's some a couple of quotes from our participants about the kind of harassment that they faced. So I just want, one of the things that's important is that students see information about themselves in the anti-bullying. And my question is, if you've been seeing any of the suicide prevention messages that target LGBT students to help prevent suicide, have you seen any transgender-specific messages? Okay, I see people responding. So we'll give that another minute. But one of the things that is very important is that when youth, especially youth who are already considering suicide or who's are living in the dire situation where they're being harassed and bullied and attacked, they need to hear that there are messages for people like them. And so one of the things that we want to encourage is that when messages are being developed for LGBT students, that they, that they are genuinely LGBT and they include information for transgender students, not just as a laundry list, but really all of the groups need to, those LGBT kids, each of those identities needs to be addressed in a way that those students feel that they're supported. Because when we leave any kids out at the moment that they're feeling desperate, then we're afraid that they'll feel even more isolated. And the other thing that we want to raise as a transgender organization is the importance of examining the role that gender identity and expression plays in the bullying of gay, lesbian, and bisexual students as well as transgender youth. Often kids are targeted for the ways in which they express their gender, whether they're deemed by their peers to be too effeminate or too masculine. And we hope that we'll continue to have dialogues about the ways in which those gender stereotypes contribute to the problems that our students face overall. So thank you so much, and I'm going to turn it back to Melissa, I guess.
Justin, thank you so much. Lots of great data there. And I know some questions have come in about where can we find these anti-bullying messages for transgender students. If any of our presenters that are coming up now have a quick answer to that, would love to hear it. Otherwise, let me go ahead and turn it over to Jenny Betts from GLSEN.
My name is Jenny Betts, and I work with GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. So here at GLSEN, some of you may be aware of our work. We basically are focusing on creating safe and respectful and healthful schools, especially for LGBT students. And I just wanted to go through a couple things about what we've been up to and also some of the statistics, talking about not just the problem, which builds upon what NCTE and PFLAG and the ADL and everyone else has done work around, but also what some of the solutions are. What we've seen actually reduces some of those risks for students. First of all, I do want to relate back to all the great stuff that Justin just said. And in particular, I want to point out to you that when we do work in schools with educators, we do training. And one of the things that we start with in the beginning and always come back to throughout it is what we call our primary message. And that primary message is that addressing anti-LGBT bias in schools makes schools safer for all children, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity or expression. So really, from our perspective, yes, first and foremost, we want to make sure that LGBT students or questioning students are safe and respected and feel included in school. But we also know that if that happens, everybody benefits. Having a safer climate means everyone benefits, and even more so because so many students, even not LGBT-identified students, are bullied or teased or harassed based on whether or not they look like a boy or act enough like a boy or a girl, oftentimes around these gender stereotypes, and also the use of that's so gay and all these things really impacts every student and their ability to just bring their whole selves to the table and really be who they are and to have a safe place to come to school. So we know the connections between anti-LGBT bullying and harassment and really sense of safety for everyone. I want to point out, and in front of you, you see something about our Safe Space Kit, which is a new campaign that we have to put a kit of information that's really actually quite wonderful into every middle and high school in the country. So you can go to safespacekit.com to find out more about that and how you can get it to your school. Also, for you on the call, you can go to glisten.org, and that's where all the resources that I'll talk about in the next minute are. But there's also, you can download the Safe Space Space Kit and other of our resources as PDFs for free. I wanted to just really quick run through some of the things that really stood out from our latest National School Climate Survey. Again, you can find this information on GLSEN.org in the research section. So, you know, we've heard these statistics before. We've been doing this survey for 10 years, and the answers seem to be similar, that 90% of LGBT students hear "that's so gay" or other ways that the word gay is used in negative ways. 61.1 felt unsafe because of their sexual orientation. About 40% felt unsafe because of how they expressed their gender, and about 85% were verbally harassed. We see students are 3 times more likely to have missed class than other students if they had been bullied and harassed. Up to 30% of students reporting in our survey that they had missed at least one entire day of school in the last month because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. We also have seen lowered educational aspirations and academic achievement for those students who are being bullied and teased and harassed, and also you know, there's connections between depression and victimization and anxiety and low self-esteem and all of those things. What we do know that helps, and this is the most important piece of my last few seconds here, is that we know that the presence of gay-straight alliances and other similar student clubs in schools does help. It does reduce feelings of unsafety. It does reduce school absenteeism. Also, inclusive curriculum. So having curriculum where LGBT themes and people in history are respectfully included pretty drastically reduces also some of those negative markers, and also increases a sense of school connectedness for LGBT youth. And then there's a huge bunch of research we've done around having supportive educators, and that's where most of you all come in. That even just having one supportive educator really, really can make the difference for a young person feeling safe at school. And when we see students that have even more than that, up to 6 or more, so a good number of adult allies on campus, their psychological well-being and educational aspirations really, really increase. The last thing I want to say is that comprehensive and enumerated bullying policies, and this goes back, some of the people were asking questions specifically about what are the sort of more institutional changes we can make, besides curriculum things, besides individual educators doing good work in a school. Also, all those bullying policies that all of you are working on in your schools, in your districts, at the state level and the federal level really do make a difference, especially when they're enumerated, meaning that they list out all the different categories that need to be protected under the law. We found that without that enumeration, they are really, really ineffective. And so that's sort of one of the political pieces also to getting them passed, is that sometimes going back to that beginning, that if we feel uncomfortable or it might be too controversial, that we don't want to name all the categories, that actually it makes them really ineffective. So there are ways to really counteract some of the horrible things that we're seeing and that we've heard about for years and years, that we know the experiences of LGBT youth are not always great in schools, but there are things that you all can do, that our parents can do, that our young people can do, and that we can work as organizations together with you. Please do visit GLSEN.org. There's a lot of great websites or great resources on there. You can always contact me as well. So thank you.
Jenny, thank you so much. Let me now introduce Ilya Pratt, who is a learning specialist at Park Day School, which is an elementary and middle school here in Oakland, California. And I'm going to hand the phone over to Ilya.
So hi there. My name is Ilya Pratt. I'm the lower grades learning specialist at Park Day School in Oakland, California. And Park Day is a private K through 8th grade independent school. We've got a student body of about 280 kids, and we're about 34 years old. And our educational philosophy is based in progressive education, the heart of which is discovery-based learning, critical thinking, and social justice. And what this looks like in the classroom is that there's very little teaching as your traditional lecturing, and instead kids are learning through exploration and dialogue with peers. Our school culture is one of inclusion, in which we appreciate and respect all aspects of our diversity. And of course, this is critical for creating safe learning environments for all members of our school community, first and foremost the kids, but also the staff and parent community. You can't learn if you don't feel safe, of course. And that inclusion and safety is probably why the average tenure of our teachers and most of our admin staff is over 20 years. As a teacher at Park, there's a lot of room to be creative in how we work with kids and how we develop curriculum. We're both compelled by our educational philosophy to address all types of diversity and social injustice, and we have a room or safe space in which to do the work. And one of the reasons I was asked to participate in this webinar is that Park has a reputation for having relatively few incidences of bullying, particularly homophobic bullying. And we will know that of course, know that bullying does happen on our campus. And as a matter of fact, we very recently had an incident of homophobia as well as sexual harassment happen here, 2 different incidences. And so it does happen, not very frequently, but it does. And in putting together these thoughts for this event, what struck me most was the amount of ongoing work that we do, that we must do as a community in order to achieve the degree of respect for diversity and safety that we do have. Kids have enormous pressure from their greater culture, and they want to be like everyone else, and of course they're going to adopt the behaviors that they think achieve this. And our school challenges to use just about every moment of our time together to build and reinforce positive community behaviors. So from day one in our school, kids are learning how to be a friend and member of the classroom and larger school community and the world beyond. The other day I was in our pre-kindergarten classroom, and someone knocked the pen container onto the floor, and the teacher immediately said, "Oh, who is going to help this child pick up the pens?" And there was a rush of small bodies to help out. And right there is a wonderfully simple example of what is happening all the time here at Park Day. Friends don't laugh at each other's mistakes. They jump in and help each other out, stand up for each other. So another interesting phenomenon you'll find in our classrooms is that the teachers they have kids model behaviors, and through this modeling, the kids start to internalize the behaviors over time. So an example is, notice how Joe is going to make room for Sue at the rug so that she feels welcome. And eventually the kids start to learn that behavior. They start to automatically do it themselves and hold it as their own. Contribute to, of course, building community. And of course, we have many, many exchanges that involve helping kids develop empathy. A frequently asked question you'll hear is, how do you think your friend feels? Look at her face. What's she telling you? And kids are taught how to dialogue to find resolution. We also have built into our program regular meeting time for the kids to talk about their differences and work through problems. We have classroom meetings weekly in the lower grades. And we also have town hall meetings and smaller advisory meetings in the middle school program. And really the heart of these is the kids they make the agenda for these meetings. They can bring up what they need to bring up. And it's a forum for kids to really talk things through. Another factor that contributes to our sort of low incident of bullying on our campus is that we don't let conflict slide. The conflicts between kids. If the kids don't bring up something, but we notice that something's happening, we make sure that it's addressed. Recently, I saw an example of this in the middle school where one of the teachers noticed an 8th grader cutting in line in front of some 7th graders. And, of course, there was more to the story than meets the eye. But the point is that in addressing it, this teacher didn't let it slide, and something that would otherwise be a very small thing could later turn into something much larger between the kids. So it's just really very proactively going after the small things without being judgmental. The homophobia incident I mentioned earlier, the response to it included the middle schoolers having a town hall meeting in which some of the It Gets Better clips available via YouTube were shown. And the message the teaching staff gave in this case was that, yes, this is happening in our community. No, we're not going to sit here and, go on about the incident that did happen or really be judgmental about that, but instead to say it is happening, and if there's something coming up for you, whether it's about homophobia or something else, there's space to bring it up in our community. So other things that sort of help to thwart negative behavior, Built into our calendar, we've got some events that celebrate diversity. We've got an LGBT Pride celebration annually in June. And then we also have Care Week, and I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about Care Week. Care Week is a campaign for acceptance, respect, and empathy. And it's a week in which the entire school is focused on a particular topic. And these included, over the years, bullying, peace, LGBTQ folks, gender, race, and learning differences. And Care Week started about 10 years ago in 2000, and it was in response, actually, to a rise in bullying incidents on the playground. And much of the power of Care Week comes from using personal stories to build empathy. And, of course, the follow-up dialogue in which the kids explore together what we can do to prevent or respond to people hurting each other. There's always an emphasis on communicating feelings, telling personal stories, and how to be an ally. And the basic structure of this Care Week is that we have a speaker and or activity in each classroom during each day of the week. And there's an opening and closing ceremony to reinforce the fact that this is a whole community event, such an important topic. We're all paying attention and participating. There's cross-grade activities. For example, the older kids might do skits about how to be an ally with the younger kids. There's some kind of central bulletin board or activity that everyone contributes to over the course of the week. And the purpose of this is to allow kids to see what other kids outside of their own class are thinking about. So, for example, with learning differences, that was learning and physical differences actually that week. We had a the bulletin board, that was an I learned statements bulletin board. So, for example, I learned that people in wheelchairs can play basketball was when it came up. And for our week focused on world peace, we tied wishes on our fairy tree. It's a tree in the center of the campus. And a very critical piece of why Care Week is successful for our community is that we bring parents into the conversation. And we do this through two things. First, we do a parent-ed event, usually the week before or the week during. And then we also send home homework that involves them. And you'll see in the slides, there's some samples of that homework in which the parents are actually filling out questions about whether they had experienced any bullying, for example, in their lives. So there's this nice exchange going on at home between the parents and the kids. It's very, very powerful. So, and Care Week hasn't always been easy for we as a staff to pull together. The topics we've addressed aren't ones that we have all the answers to. We tried to do our best talking about things like gender when the book on how to talk with kids about gender differences wasn't written yet. And race, despite the many resources available, we had a lot of work to do as a staff to prepare for Care Week, and we still, are still working on that as a staff. And of course, we do make mistakes when we tackle these big topics, when we're really stretching ourselves in the school. A great example is, or rather a very concrete example is, in the slides you'll see there's a stenciled salt words, and these were words on our that an artist came in and helped the kids stencil on our playground. And they're all words related to homophobia was the way they were talked about. And however, there were those of us who were LGBT watching through this, realizing that words that we do embrace, for example, dyke, I think is there in that slide, and the word had positive associations with. As part of the culminating event, the kids all gathered around this big spread of words on the playground, and then when the whistle was blown or something, they all scrubbed them out with their feet. And so some of us were watching this happen going, oh dear, what message are we giving these children? Eradicating all the words that we hold. So anyway, we do make our mistakes. And one other really important mistake we made was, at least from my perspective, was during the presidential election when Proposition 8 here in California was also on being voted on. the middle schoolers were, of course, doing a mock election, and so here they are debating and voting on my wife and my, marriage, the validity of our marriage. And I have to say, that really brought home to me how we, as a liberal progressive school, trying to do what's right for kids so they'll be prepared to help make this a better world. We just can't get too cocky thinking we know how best to teach them. These harder topics are tricky, and we really have to make the space for us as a staff to check in and work through things together, bring in outside resources such as No Dumb Questions. We've definitely watched that as a staff, and it was really helpful. Over the years, it took us a long time to really get to the point of where we could talk about gender with kids. There was concern that bringing up gender, sort of gender variance with the younger kids would be problematic. And I just so remember the voice of one of the kindergarten teachers going, I don't want to bring this up to them. It's going to be too confusing for them. And somewhere in there, I can't remember who, if it was me or somebody else, found out about No Dumb Questions. And it, watching it just really reminded us of where young kids are in thinking about gender differences. They're at a very, very basic place, very simple, how is this going to affect me? Well, am I going to get to still, play with you with my dolls or whatnot, or will I get to play with you with my dolls, I think is the way it goes in your film. And it was just a really good reminder of where children are. We adults put so much on of our own stuff into these harder topics. We make them hard, not the kids. But it's always worth it. All this hard work, we're worth it. It's worth it, and we're really proud when, in those times when kids who the staff knows are struggling with challenges of their particular diversity, when they decide to talk to their classmates, or even kids in other classes about what they're experiencing. We've had kids with two moms share their wedding stories. Children with learning differences talk about them openly for the first time. Kids with physical differences relate their experiences. And kids talking about how gender stereotypes just don't work for them. So it really brings it home to why we do this work. So bringing it all together, the things that we do here at Park Day that really contribute to our success and having a very low rate of incidence of bullying and other types of really negative behavior include this ongoing building of community, actively teaching kids how to dialogue about their differences and resolve their disagreements, standing up and being allies for each other, and really providing space for kids to bring up what they need to bring up, and the staff as well. So with that, if you ever need more ideas or thoughts about how we do it here at Park Day, feel free to contact the school. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ilya. There's so much more there, as with everyone's talks today. So I hope that we have a chance someday, stay down the line, to do something together again, or that you have a chance to get in touch with them directly. So let me now turn it over to Sue Rankin, who is at Penn State and also works with Campus Pride, and is going to give us an overview of some really fabulous research that they've been doing. Sue?
Sue Rankin from Penn State, and you can see the slides that are up here for you. I want to go through them relatively quickly. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to do this. The importance here around, for me, is that this is how you get to talk to your administration and other faculty, which is that campus climate affects students, and it affects their learning, and it affects their development. And this slide kind of talks about those things. In particular, looking at LGBTQ campus climate, in a 2003 study that I did, we looked at climate for students on campuses and found that there's a lot of discrimination and harassment. It's a small study. Since that time, there's other people doing work on this as well. Found that there are perceptions of campus climate studies. There are other studies talking about harassment and violence. Others looking at some of the programs that are more successful or some best practices. So I want to try and quickly go through some of the research around this so you have some ammunition to actually use with your administration when trying to do this from a perspective of folks that don't know much about our work. So if you look at this next slide, it talks about if you have positive experiences with climate and perceptions of climate, you have success. For students, that means positive educational experiences and healthy identity development, and that leads to persistence and retention. And that's a really big thing. We're seeing lots of students, both in high school in GLSEN's report, and then also in our report and the work that also NCTE and NGLCF are doing, that students are dropping out. They aren't persisting, and dropping out via suicide is obviously the most final way of dropping out, but there's lots of information about this influencing their persistence and retention as well as their ability to succeed in school. In our 2010 report, you can see, if you go to Campus Pride website, you can download the executive summary and get a copy of the full report. We had lots of people respond. In particular, we had lots of folks responding as along different gender identity continuums and along different queer spectrum. So one of the things that we've learned is that language is important, and that language is changing on a daily basis, and my students teach me all the time about how that language changes. We had many people of color respond to the surveys, looking at intersex identities, looking at not just one's individual identity as sexual or gender, but also the race, spirituality, et cetera. And the next slide kind of gives you an idea of some of the ways that folks responded when we asked them what your identities are, both gender identity and their sexual identity. We also asked people to respond in regards to some of the important findings. We found that queer spectrum students hide their identities, and more across trans spectrum hiding their gender identities to identify or not to experience intimidation. We found that they fear for their physical safety on their campuses. We found that they experienced harassment, and that this happened much more across a trans spectrum than it did across sexual identity. So it was improved since 2003 around sex identity, but had regressed, in fact, in regards to trans spectrum. We wanted to allow voices to be heard, so within the report we provide not only quantitative data, but also some of the qualitative pieces, which I found to be incredibly troubling in 2010. We provided a kind of a sampling here of those voices, and we provide many more of those within the report, examining how students actually are talking about experiencing their climate. The takeaways for us, for the biggest pieces for me, were that over a third of the queer spectrum and trans spectrum students have seriously considered leaving their institution because of the climate. And they identified that those were harassment kinds of environments, harassing environments, and also that they weren't respected by their faculty. We also talked about already about them concealing their identity, so avoid intimidation and fearing for their physical safety. So if you look again back at their original persistence, if we have negative kinds of climate, then in fact that decreases their persistence and retention. So we really are trying to increase that among our LGBT students. The difficult thing about doing research on queer spectrum or trans spectrum students, faculty, and staff is that there are no national databases that look at those. The national studies that are done, the Student Engagement Survey, which is NESE, the SERP study, which is the first-year student study, and the Common Application, none of those include sex identity or gender identity as part of their questions. And so these are all convenience samples, which oftentimes are critiqued or criticized by my other colleagues in doing this research. So unfortunately, currently on college campuses, there are only 7% that have any kind of institutional support. That means somebody is paid or part of their job or all of their job to assist LGBTQ students. Only 13% have sexual orientation and non-discrimination policy. Only 6% have gender identity. And these policies, while even if we have them, may not reflect change or be a catalyst for actions. At least it shows that the institution has something in place to support and or show visible support for their students. So we do provide in the report, this is a headings to the different areas that we talk about in regards to in being more inclusive and therefore being more welcoming and changing the climate, inclusive policies, institutional commitment, integrating the curriculum. As a faculty member, that's my biggest thing, is trying to get more things in the curriculum that was mentioned earlier. Responding some way appropriately to those anti-gay incidents if they occur, considerations for housing and health care, especially for trans students, and then improving access and retention efforts among the institution. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sue. That's great. Let's now move to Allison Subasic from also at Penn State. Allison?
Hi. Thanks for having me. So I was asked to just briefly give a little introduction. I came out when I was in college, and that's one of the reasons I do the work I do today, because there were no adequate resources for me, besides a great counselor that we had on campus, but there were no resource centers. There were no professional careers on campus at that point. And I saw a lot of my friends struggle through things. I certainly did. And there needs to be resources on college campuses for students. And part of that comes from the research that you just saw Sue Rankin talk about, that there's still only 7% of campuses have LGBT centers or people doing this work. So some of the things I've worked on in the past are listed here. I don't know really how important those are, but the number one important thing for me is the last bullet point here, that students are our number one priority. That's why we have colleges and universities, and we need to be able to support them and keep them in school and increase our retention and recruitment rates. So some of the things that we do here at Penn State that other people can model their programs after. Let's see. So life here at Penn State University for folks that are LGBT, and that includes students, staff, and faculty, and our alumni and people that live in the surrounding community. But we have 24 campuses throughout the Commonwealth, and each location is vastly different from each other. The main campus is at University Park, and that's in State College, Pennsylvania. Some of the resources that we have and organizations at the main campus include inclusive policies and procedures that go over actually all of the campuses, and those are important things that Dr. Rankin was also talking about. We have a commission on LGBT equity. If your campus does not have some kind of commission or faculty staff group, I would encourage you to get one or have one started. A lot of different student groups. Not all students are going to want to fit in one box, so it's nice to have a variety of different ways for them to get involved. Obviously, I would advocate for an LGBT resource center. We have an LGBT minor here at our campus, and we have gay and lesbian community groups for folks to get involved in if they are faculty and staff. There's a local PFLAG group, and there's a lot of other supportive offices on campus that we do a lot of collaboration with that are great. But the reality for many in Pennsylvania and many colleges and universities around the country is you can live in a really great location with beautiful resources and surroundings around you, and predominantly it is a supportive environment, but there is homophobia and a lack of awareness and education around LGBTA issues and concerns, particularly outside of the university community, and that's common in many college areas, not necessarily just at Penn State. So those are other things that we need to work on. So some of the specific resources, programs and interventions that we do here at Penn State are outreaching to all of the different campuses and doing consulting. We have an LGBT mentorship program, LGBTA lectureship series, Pride Week and COD programming, working with student groups, Safe Zone programs. Ours is called the LGBT Support Network. We have a speakers bureau. Those are really easy to start and great on campuses. We do an LGBTA leadership retreat. We do Lavender graduation. We have a safe space program. We have lots of amazing resources and materials and incredibly knowledgeable staff that can help whoever comes through the door. And I want to direct all of you to the LGBTA Architect, because it's something that we created here at Penn State with the help of the Calvinist Foundation and the consortium of higher education educators and folks that do my kind of work around the country. But the website for that is architect.lgbtcampus.org, and there's great resources there if you're at a college or university and want to get some more support for starting an office on your campus or doing programs. And my last slide is how we use no dumb questions. It's one of the things Melissa asked us to kind of share, and I use actually the video a lot, particularly at other campuses when I do presentations, and specifically if I do transgender training. It's a great way, especially for staff and faculty, to just open up and talk about the topic of transitioning, transgendered individuals, and it's a really non-threatening, great way to get conversation going. So that's it. Thanks.
That's great, Allison. Thank you so much for all that. Next, we're going to hear from Pat Bailey from Out and Equal, who, Pat, I'm so excited that you're here today to talk to us about what things you're seeing from your vantage point kind of across lots of different workplaces and what people are doing and thinking about and finding that's especially successful for them in creating safe and welcoming spaces.
Thanks, Melissa, and appreciate that. And appreciate all the good information that's come out so far at all different levels on how to be allies and how to be involved in your companies. And what I'm going to try to do is take a little look at what's happening in the workplace. And if you're looking, saying, what are your expectations? What do you want to do when you get a job, when you get out of school, or if you're still in school and you're getting a job? Do you just want that job? Do you want to keep your job and be able to be out as LGBT? Are you starting to look at things like equal benefits for yourself and your family? How about safety in the workplace? Where your job is just productive and meaningful, and being able to bring your whole self into work. So those are some of the questions that we start to ask when we start evaluating workplaces and saying, what happens when you get out of school and now you're looking for a job? So there's some tools that we're going to give you, because what we see is that employees, when they get into the workplace, 17% in a study recently done called Degrees of Equality by HRC have a fear of getting fired as part of the reason they don't come out. Another 13% talk about fear for their own personal safety. Starts to sound a little bit like bullying that's happening in the schools. And another 11% don't come out because of past humiliation. So those are some of the things when you're looking at a job and thinking about what to do next. How can you make sure that you get into an environment that's going to support all that you are? So one of the first things is be sure you check out the company and their policy. They should include in their equal opportunity, employment opportunity policy, the words sexual orientation and gender identity. They should have benefits for same-sex partners, transgender health. You should be able to bring your spouse to work and be able to have that be an open and supportive relationship. One of the best things you can look for is employee resource groups. Within companies, they create groups and organizations around affinities, be that as women, people of color, LGBT. If there is an employee resource group, many times you find a lot more progress being made because there's someone working with the top management and HR to make things happen. Secondly, you can do your own research. You can evaluate a company and take a look at the Out and Equal 20 Steps to an Inclusive Workplace. There's a toolkit there to say what are the kind of questions you want to ask, or what do you want to see and find out about a company. Of course, the Corporate Equality Index is a big driver there, so you can check out a company if you're working with any of the major organizations. But you can also talk to your own company about maybe they want to submit their name and get involved in this if you don't find them in the CEI. And then finally, Diversity Inc. is an outside the LGBT community that ranks the top 10 companies. So all these are really good resources that you can begin to do your own research when you're starting to think about getting a job. And then use the Internet. Check out the company homepage. Do you see yourself? Do you see LGBT images? Do you see links to their employee resource groups? Are you able to find out something about what their policy and benefits and their positions are and how they're involved? And then search for stories about the companies and LGBT issues. Looking at news. Have they been in the news lately for good things they've done or for issues or problem areas that might be a concern for you? And then find out if they support legislative initiatives. Talking to people, previous employees, is another good way to do that. So what we begin to see then is as you're going through all these steps, you get a pretty good idea of what the world is going to be like in that company. It's not perfect, just like you can a lot of times create a good story around who you are. There still may be problems, but this can at least get you into an environment where you can work and you can be more aware and you can have more support to be all who you are. And finally, when you do start working, make sure that you're doing the best job you can. That's the number one criteria when you start working, and come out, come out, come out. The numbers indicate that if you know someone who's LGBT, you can help break down myths and stereotypes, and people ask you about how the company and how things are with you. When you enter a company, if they have an LGBT employee resource group, join them, and then get educated. You can find allies or be an ally if you're not LGBT, so that individuals know that you're a safe individual to talk to and share their lives with. If something happens, just like with bullying in schools, make sure you report the issues or concerns. And you can network with other companies as you start to get working in your career through things like Out and Equal regional affiliates, and then the Out and Equal Summit, and there's some information there. So make that better as you get older and you get out of school, and make sure you stop bullying right before it starts. So, Melissa, back to you, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Pat. That was a really wonderful overview. Let's go next to Laura Bismeyer from Corning Corporation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Melissa. Corning Incorporated is a company, a global company of about 26,000 employees that whose home sits in the Corning, New York region just north of Pennsylvania. And we have an organization there, Spectra. I am an engineer, and I am a member of Spectra. Spectra has a mission to support employees, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and their allies, employees for Corning Incorporated. We've been an active organization with a 10-year history, And our mission is really to make sure that we create an environment where people of all sexual orientations, family arrangements, gender identities can bring their whole selves to work. And what I really want to share with this group today is about some of the work that we have done to tie into our community. Corning, New York is a small community, and part of setting the environment and tone at work is helping to educate and set the tone and environment in the community. So Spectra does quite a bit of work outside of the corporation, tying to other organizations in the community, and we have an annual event where we bring all these organizations together. And a couple of years ago, we were excited to be able to host the No Dumb Questions film. With this hosting of this film, we were able to bring over 100 people in the community together. And what Spectra did around this film is to do an outreach to the schools in the area, including the Corning Community College, as well as several middle and high schools. And we actually donated 10 of the DVDs, but we provided the information about the DVDs to more schools than the 10 that we were actually able to hand out. And I think the point that's important here is that schools in the community and corporations in the community can partner and tie together in order to take the community to a different, higher level of awareness and acceptance. And that both the corporations and the schools have a responsibility to have a relationship with each other, to leverage each other in the community, to make safe places in the schools for all children, including those children of the employees that are employees of the corporation. And I think Spectra does a really nice job with this. We've been very fortunate to have quite a bit of support from the corporation. We do have a value of valuing the individual, and under the heading of that value, we've had quite a bit of support from our CFO as well as our CTO, and some lingering support from our CEO as well. It's been really nice to see that there's been a great leverage and linkage between the school system in the area and the corporation, and that we've been able to really go after making safe places not only for our employees in the community, but also for children of our employees in the community.
Thank you so much, Laura. Okay, let's move on to, I think, who will be our last presenter today. Thanks so much, Barbara, for waiting till the end. This is Barbara Satin that we're going to go to next from the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force's Institute for Welcoming Resources, which focuses on communities of faith and their relationship to LGBT issues. Barbara.
I'm Barbara Satin, and I'm Faith Work Associate with the Institute for Welcoming Resources. I'm a transgender woman, and I'm an aunt, but I'm not the Aunt Barbara from the film, No Dumb Questions. But I want to talk a little bit about the work that the Institute for Welcoming Resources does around one of the major elements that we heard about earlier in some of the presentations, and that is the role of faith communities, and in many cases the negative role that faith communities have played around bullying and harassment for GLBT people, youth and adults. And the Institute for Welcoming Resources was formed about 10 years ago among the major Christian denominations. They're the Welcoming Churches of the United Church of Canada, the Association of Welcoming Baptists, the Episcopal Church Integrity, More Light Presbyterians, the Disciples of Christ GLAD organization, Open and Affirming Program, and the Coalition for United Church of Christ, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America's Reconciling in Christ program, the United Methodist Reconciling Ministries, Room for All, Reformed Church in America, and then the supportive congregation of the Brethren Mennonite Council and the Welcoming Church Network of the Community of Christ. So many of the major Christian denominations are part of the Welcoming Church movement, and the Institute for Welcoming Resources helps them in their purpose, which is to achieve the full acceptance and participation of all sexual orientations and gender identities into the life of the church. Now, we do that in the Institute for Welcoming Resources through the development and production and distribution of resources to support the Welcoming Church movement, and we do conferences and trainings designed to inspire, empower, and equip members and leadership within the Welcoming Church movement, and to expand networks and create coalitions within and beyond the Welcoming Church movement. Some of the resources, we have a Find a Church on our website, which is www.welcomingresources.org. And if you go on to that website, you can find a church by looking at any state and just clicking on the city and find churches that are welcoming. These are the most of the major Christian denominations are on this website. We also do resources. We have an extensive bibliography on a wide variety of issues on church and theology and biblical resources around gender and sexuality. We have a calendar of events. We have a news service. We have templates and suggestions for congregations to go through the welcoming program that's applicable to their denomination. We also do coalition building, and we do conferences and trainings. The coalition building, we convene the Bishops and Elders Council, which is a denominationally and racially and culturally diverse network of Christian LGBT-affirming churches touching the lives of about 98 million people. And it's also, we do the work around convening the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, National Religious Leadership Roundtable, which is gathered to amplify the voices of pro-LGBT faith leaders, and it's a multi-faith organization, not just Christian. We have Muslim and Jewish and Buddhist and all faith groups that want to participate are welcome. Our trainings are designed to help congregations understand what it means to be welcoming and affirming, but we also like to take it past that point to give them resources that will help them to understand that their role is not just to be a place of sanctuary for LGBT people, but it's a place that's supposed to take the justice issue and equality issue out into the community. So we want people to be trained to have an effective voice at city councils, at school boards, in front of state legislatures, to do the things that are necessary within their community to assure that there is safety and security and equality for LGBT people. The last thing that I wanted to show on the website is some of the things that we are currently featuring, most of them having to do with church responses to the issue of bullying. And I've just mentioned, show a couple of the resources that are on the website showing that churches and faith leaders are taking an important role in addressing the issue and understanding that the church has played a significant role in making places less hospitable than they should be. There's a lot of work ahead for us, but we are making progress. The important project called It Gets Better is reflected in the work that's being done within the church congregation and church communities. We look forward to helping you in any way that we can. Again, the website resource is www.welcomingresources.org.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much, and thank you so much to all of the presenters for all of your work in being here today and pulling together the information and squeezing it into such a short time frame. I know there's lots more I would love to hear from everyone, but maybe we can all work together to figure out how to make that happen in future events, or we'll look forward to hearing more from you on your own websites and your own programs that you're doing. Thank you again, Pat, so much for being our master technical facilitator, and Out and Equal for co-sponsoring this event. And thank you to everyone out there who's joined the call. And we will, as we've said through the chats here today, get the recording posted online and be in touch with you about more suggestions and ways for you all to collaborate more with each other and get more dialogue going around these issues. So thank you again so much to everyone, and I look forward to seeing you out in the world.